Firstly, I'm really glad you took that quantitative analytical course because you brought that data alive and really presented me with quite an awareness today. And I just wonder, we are an educated society and we let this continue on. Like, I see the Lego as something quite, what did you say, subversive, or if everyone's, seeing these images all the time. So just what everyone else is saying, it's been going on for hundreds of years. And how do you see change coming? Like, as educated people, how do we change this? How do we respond to these things? How do we get this message that this is wrong or it's not working? And I know it's a difficult question, but as educated people, we have a responsibility to look at social justice issues and make change. And I just wonder, how do we do that? Every child is playing with Lego. That's a lot of children. And, it's almost like brainwashing. But that's been going on for hundreds of years.
Right.
And it continues as we're speaking. It's not something that's stopped as we speak now. Right? Cultures are disappearing at a rate as many as endangered animals. Wade Davis's work,
I think, in a way, you've answered your own question. I think that as educated people, I think we need to use that education and to be critical thinkers about all of this stuff. So not just blithely accepting things that are presented to us, but to actually to critically evaluate them. And my kid didn't actually lend me these. He gave them to me. He didn't want them anymore after we talked about it for a while. But he and he's not perfect by any means. But I think we just need to be more critical of that and listen to what Indigenous people are actually saying to us. It's not about consultation being kind of something you have to do before you can mine a Indigenous territory, but it's something that needs to be on a nation-to-nation basis and on a real human level as well. And we tend not to do that. You still hear people saying, "Oh, well, I'm not like that. Some of my best friends are Indians." And it's like, well, that's nice, but what do you actually know, and what do you think about that? And, but I think we just need to be more critical and about what we see. Ian again? Or no, sorry, I guess Angel.
Go ahead.
Thanks, dude. When we were talking earlier, someone was mentioning about the difference in the United States and here, and I guess because I grew up on the East Coast, what the imagery and what I heard a lot as a child was Hiawatha. So just leaving that out there. And then I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, I guess maybe media theory or something that I had been studying a long time ago, and the idea of simulacra and like the repeating of something that you no longer have the original intact. You've just got this imitation of it. Yeah, so that's what I think, that's what I fear happens with this process of stereotyping, and that definitely the noble savage and the savage, even that alligator imagery. And so I find myself having concern when things are made, contemporary things like this new film, Third World, and a lot of people advocating for it. And I have concern when I see that about those images. There's lots of children in it. Some of them are explaining what their experience. It's about a film that's recently been released, and it's about the community KI in Ontario and about suicide in the community. And so specifically two parents, a mother and a stepfather, of a family that leave behind 8 children. So there's some images of those children describing what they experienced when they found one of the bodies. And then just random images of all these children in the village, in the town. And I just feel like now that's on film, and then they intercut it with all these shots of like the turned over chair, repeated of like, oh yeah, somebody obviously got up and jumped off that chair. And I just feel like I don't feel great about this, even though it's a documentary, and just more stereotyping, I find. So I know it's not the same as what we're looking at.
Well, I haven't actually seen the film, so I will be careful to comment on it, I think. But I take your take your point on that, though, from what I've heard about it.
So going back to Hiawatha, I see that what I experienced as a child was a sense of them being compliant and always helpful, useful. Like, I don't know, there's some weird version of what that true person, Hiawatha, or other their true role in life, not necessarily just
Right.
the planet.
Yeah, and we don't understand who Hiawatha was. And right, I grew up in Ontario, and so that was Hiawatha. There was Hiawatha camps everywhere. And it was, it wasn't even, I don't even remember thinking that it was
Yeah.
an issue.
I was thinking as a kid, where is the real, like, where was the real Hiawatha from? You go into the tours and different things, but it wasn't created. So it does exist in Canada, for sure.
Yeah.
And the use of the totem pole across Canada, converted into melamine or whatever it is plastic you want.
Right, made in Japan.
Made in-
China now,
yeah,
probably.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you for your lecture.
excellent. Steve,
I just wanted to make one comment, because of what Steve said, actually. It's about the gradient of images. And part of that gradient that isn't often appreciated is the symbolic annihilation that happens to Indigenous people and Indigenous involvement, right? So instead of having a positive or a negative image, there just simply is no image. And I think that that's like a really important part and component of how we identify our surroundings and how we identify with each other. Well, natives weren't there. Oh, really? Tell me about that. There's natives in, look behind, a native behind every tree, right? I mean, come on, right? So, and just one of the things that got me thinking about that was looking at this history wall. And like, we're in a post-secondary institution that has a First Nation Studies department, has a history department. And I look at that wall and it's whitewashed. There's no native imagery there except for one where they have natives dancing for an opening or for a convocation ceremony. So what kind of message is that being portrayed by the place that quotes or that is supposed to educate people in the ways of the world, right? So where's that discussion? I'd like to see that discussion take part, because this is higher learning, and for me to be comfortable with how, I don't know, I guess being native here, it's like you got the negative images that we all fight against, you got the positive images that we kind of accept but we don't know why, right? And then we have these no images, which is completely, it completely undermines our involvement and the importance of our contributions to post-secondary, and I think there's a lot of room for that. So I think, when it comes to the gradients, we need to be able to accept that that's a part of that.
Yeah.
That stereotype is actually that symbolic annihilation.
It's like an erasure.
Yeah.
And that has a long history too, I think. Back to the contact again and the understanding that this land was empty and therefore was open to settlement by non-Indigenous peoples, this notion of an empty land. And I think there, as far as your point about the history wall, I think there's a number of historians here that probably weren't consulted in the creation of that, which is a whole other soul kind of aspect for them.
But we had students were asked to stand in front of it and unveil it. And that has been an interesting experience. And I was under the impression, was told that it had First Nations content and representation and honoring something. And I stood there at that wall in the cutting ceremony and helped unveil it and found that little tiny picture of the paddle dancing and was just utterly stunned. But what do you say? It's a PR situation, and you got to deal with it after, and then because we weren't allowed to see it before, and there was a team of us. We were asked to be a human curtain.
Yeah.
And academics were not consulted on the project at all.
Isn't that a bizarre thing?
I'm so glad my photo was cropped out, like when it went in the newspaper. I'm right next to it. And on the website.
I mean, we've got a vibrant history department, a vibrant First Nations Studies department, and nobody is consulted about this thing, which is, I'm not an administrator, so I'm taking a heat for that.
I've stepped down from that particular leadership.
Yeah, I know. My job is tenuous enough at this point. John?
On the matter of the history wall, revisionist history, until just a few short months ago, I labored under the misapprehension that VIU was 41 years old. So,
What did you know?
the things change, right? And maybe that issue relates to the point you were talking about today. I understand that there has been a furious debate over the years about what to do with the Holocaust, the concentration camps. And interested parties have split along the lines of those who say these concentration camps have to be completely destroyed and eradicated, and others who said these concentration camps have to be kept as memorials of the past. And I think there's something in that that relates, and there's a question I want to ask you about the delicacy of destroying or maintaining a memory of cultural differences. So it's not expressly germane to your point, but I think it touches on your point. I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
About which?
Destroying or remembering cultural differences.
Okay.
Because let me put it in a really kind of an outlandish way. The image of the Cleveland Indians is, in a sense, more expressive of the realities of the time in which that image was carved out for the team. Let's say, I don't know, 80 or 90 years ago or something like that. Your point is that it also says something now. And the signals it sends are mixed, or how people understand it are mixed. We have to understand symbols like this with a kind of critical disposition and with a sophisticated disposition. Well, does that sophisticated disposition require us to destroy that imagery, or to look at that imagery and remember the difference between the culture embodied in the creation of that imagery and the cultural moment now?
Well, I wouldn't have too much of a problem if they wanted to take that image and put it in a baseball museum or something.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's still being used, and it is still being used,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's a problem. And if we're supposed to be educated and progressive, how can we still, accept that image? Would be, I guess, my point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you're right? It was created 80 years ago, or whenever it was created, and maybe that should be remembered.
But my question isn't about that image. I'm really approaching the delicacy of history, and I'm thinking of the history wall and its public relations motives and all of those things, and yet the delicacy of being faithful to remembering cultural differences and cultural change, and at the same time changing things, actually changing things from the point of view of a historian.
Well, I think that why choose the image that they did? Why not have a graphic of the first Indigenous graduate, or the first Indigenous faculty member? Any of those things would be better than the stereotypical paddle dancers. However wonderful that is, without any explanation of what that is, because it just seems like this exotic thing now. We're just emphasizing the exoticism of Indigenous cultures, and it's divided. And yes, that did happen, I guess, but it has to be taken in context and with other more, someone said, more positive images, at least the one side. And I agree, that I wouldn't want to forget about. And I tend to look at, as a historian, I tend to look at the dark underbelly of history anyway. So I'm quite happy to reinforce those ideas that were held in the past. But at the same time, we need to show that we're not like that, or we want not to be like that anymore. And we need to prove that we're not, and we're not doing that.